Well, morning folks, back to the bike with you again. Thanks for tuning in. Trust you're all well. Some of you thinking you're getting your bikes out of the garage, and take a look at your screen and you'll see I'm out today in extremely wet conditions. It's been an interesting week or two, to be honest, for me, more of which in a few minutes, but I thought it'd be good today to actually come out on a really horrendous wet day, on the basis that even though I've owned the bike since November, I have actually been picking and choosing my riding days so that actually it hasn't been raining. So whilst the conditions might have been damp underfoot, or occasionally I might have got a bit of a shower when I was out, I've so far deliberately avoided coming out in heavy rain, and today is certainly, I would suggest, medium to heavy rain. So I've got the new Metzeler Road Tech on the front, the 01. Bit of a chance just to get to know my tyre again. Also, a chance just to sort of, I guess, sort of test the weather protection properties of the RT, and also my richer rain gear as well. I mean, the pants I've got on, I forget the exact name of them, but they literally were £20, and seem to get very good reviews. The jacket as well, I think, was about 40 or 50 quid. I'll put the link on the screen later on when I edit the video. But I've got that over my leather jacket, over my jeans. Okay, so successfully navigated the junction, got a bit too close up to that BMW. Cancel the indicator. But yeah, I thought it's one of the things, I've done a lot of cricket training in the past, a lot of cricket coaching. I was a qualified cricket coach up to a reasonable level, and one of the maxims in sort of sports coaching is that you make the practice hard so the game is easy. So I'm deliberately sort of taking myself out of my comfort zone today. And again, I'll be taking everything easy. The bike's sitting on rain mode, and we'll just see how it goes really. But it's just a bit of an experiment really, just to sort of just to take a ride out in different conditions, because later on in the year I certainly want to get out into the great outdoors and explore the great British landscape. So I've been spending a little bit of time with Basecamp, with Garmin, with Google, mapping out a few interesting routes for later on in the year, which I'll be sharing with you, and I hope you'll find those of interest. But obviously on those rides, you know, I might set out on a nice warm day and the weather might change, so just good to get out. So like I said, it's been to be honest, it's been a pretty traumatic week or two really. So the first thing was I set out around the Cotswolds about probably a week and a half ago, fully intended to film the trip. So the first thing was that I just loaded a 64 gigabyte micro SD card into the Drift Ghost S, and for some reason it doesn't like it, so that failed to record, and I just thought that was a formatting issue, so I reformatted it, went out again on the following recorded ride aiming to put a film up for you, and again that failed. So I've got the 32 gigabyte card back in. Whilst the Drift Ghost S, I think it's supposed to work with a 64 gigabyte card, for whatever reason on my last two rides it actually hasn't done that. That was the first thing then. Second thing then was the ride around the Cotswolds itself. So from where I am in the sort of Midlands, I set off, headed south into Buckinghamshire, into the town of Buckingham, and then headed west over towards the Cotswolds. And I've got to say, the standard of the roads around Buckinghamshire and around the Cotswolds was absolutely awful. I would say that on a sort of a typical good quality B road, let's say, you know, as wide as this motorway slip road I'm on at the moment, let's just navigate the junction, match the speed, nothing coming. Move out. Yeah, so on a road as wide as the one I've just come off that little slip road there, Not only were the potholes terrible, I mean in some cases, I mean one of the potholes I passed was probably at least 10 feet long. It was a groove and would certainly have had a biker off, but there were many more like that. But down the middle of the road, down the central section, I would say there was a strip at least 4 feet wide of just pure gravel and mud. And this literally lasted, I did a 125-mile ride, and I would say a good 75% of that ride had roads like that. So bear in mind, if you're following my sort of story where I am at the moment with the IAM instruction, and for me what I'm really trying to internalise at the moment is this whole idea of using the information ahead of me to make a decision as to what position I should be in on the road. And I always want to be on the safest position, so of course I'm moving from left to centre to right, you know, curb to command to crown as it's known, position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is you want to call it. So I'm trying to do that in a very disciplined fashion, and what I found was that all the way through that ride I was literally on tenterhooks thinking about moving across that central part of the reservation. Felt like the bike, and I didn't actually feel the bike slip at any point, but I think that's because I was so ginger with it. Now again, I'm just curious about what your experience of this has been and how you personally deal with that. I've taken a little bit of advice already from one of my back to the bike cyber friends. So I'm just trying to understand the picture really as to how that would be coped with. So that, to be honest, I wouldn't say it spoiled the ride, but it certainly took the edge off it. It just felt like I couldn't sort of ride the machine. I wasn't able to build up any sort of rhythm really, so it meant that I had to dramatically reduce my speed, and literally I was watching everything like a hawk. So that was the second thing really. The third thing then is that on the RT, so I pointed out, didn't I, if you watched the my video on the tyre change, the Metzeler Road Tech, and how I solved the, or at least started to get towards solving the my problem with being tentative on right-handers. And I mentioned on that video that that the bike weighs 265 kilograms, and I've got to say I'm being reasonably confident now. Again, I'm just going to keep an eye on this lorry. Just divide the risk between the lorry and the junction. Yeah, so 265 kilograms. So at this sort of speed, you know, anything really above, I would say 6 or 7 miles an hour, I'm actually very comfortable with in terms of handling the bike. What's getting me is the slow speed manoeuvring. So I went to a local railway station car park on I think it was a Saturday morning actually, and did a bit of practicing. So I mean, I can recite the doctrine from heart about, you know, looking where you're going and all this kind of stuff, looking where you want the bike to go, you know, using the clutch biting point, using the rear brake, and unfortunately I dropped the bike. Now that's the second time it's happened, and it's the second time it's happened in the same circumstances where it basically I'm trying to turn, make a right turn, and the bike sort of runs out of steam and then topples over, and once the RT is going, I'm assuming, unless you're the Incredible Hulk, there's actually nothing you can do to stop that. So that was a bit of a blow to the pride as well. Now that said, if you've seen the pictures of my bike, I've got these wonderful Krauser engine protection bars, and they do an absolutely superb job. So the bike is literally, well, it's got just a little mark on the right hand wing mirror, but apart from that, absolutely nothing. I don't tend to ride with the panniers on. So again, not a problem, but obviously it affects your pride and sort of knocks your confidence a little bit. So anyway, I got back on the horse anyway, did 10 more minutes of slow riding practice, so that was that. So yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting week and a half really. So I think, you know, when you're coming back to the bike, I think the message is that, you know, you certainly have your ups and you have your downs, you know. I think the key is to sort of get back on and think about it, reflect on it, and just get on with it again really. So, and then I started thinking, I'm probably opening a can of worms here, but I started thinking, well actually, you know, coming back to the bike, was going for a massive beast like the RT the right decision. I've reflected on that and I've actually said to myself, yes, actually it is. I actually don't mind dropping the, well, I do mind dropping the bike, but it's not the end of the world. It's just a thing, you know. In that sense, it's not important. And if I'd bought a smaller bike, you know, I would have always felt that I'd actually wanted the larger bike as well. I think particularly as I grow in confidence, and one of the aims of getting this bike was to sort of really challenge myself. I do like a personal learning challenge. I do like to learn a new skill. Being a professional trainer myself, you know, I'm sort of very interested in how all that works. Got to say, this Roadtec 01 feels very planted on this road surface. Decent bit of tarmac here. So far so good, by the way, with the water ingress completely bone dry. It's interesting, with the screen in this position, you get a bit of sort of water spillage coming over the top when it's as wet as it is today. But to be honest, your body and your legs are very well shielded. I've got the heated seat on, got the grips on, heated grips on, so that's keeping me nice and cosy. So I guess one good thing about all this rain coming down is that hopefully it is going to wash the roads clear. I think now we've probably had 4 or 5 serious doses of snow over the winter in the UK. I guess those of you living in continental Europe or the States or Canada, I guess you're used to this, but in the UK that's probably as much snow as we've had for probably 6 or 7 years actually. The Shoei Neartec, which I've got the Mark 1, is working well as well. It's not steaming up. Got the pin lock inside it. I took that off and cleaned it a couple of weeks ago, so thanks to my cyber friends on Ridercam TV for explaining how you do that. Again, more paint, more signs, more danger. One of the things I think I've learnt recently is that in my sort of digital over positioning problem, on that right hand bend I'd have been way out on the right hand side looking for a view round it, and of course exposing myself to any oncoming traffic, you know, particularly a heavy truck or a white van man or someone who's maybe crossed over the road as well, just trying to clip it short. And again, I've just learnt just to be slightly more cautious there. And that the only purpose of that positioning is to open up the view, and then once you've got the view, you've got the information, you then start planning for the next one. So again, I've been taking a bit of advice this week from a trusted friend about how we do that. You know you are, thank you very much. But in any kind of learning, you know, knowing it's one thing, doing it consistently, particularly when you're under pressure, is something else, isn't it? And that's why we practice. And as I've mentioned before on these videos, you know, the general research these days tell you that it takes probably 10,000 repetitions of a conscious act to internalise it, to make it, to push it, press it down into the subconscious. I've got to say, riding the RT on a wet day feels very much like riding the RT on a dry day. I'm just as warm. The bike is sticking to the road. At some point I will think about changing that back tyre. It is a little bit square, but there's plenty of tread left in it, and I've got to be honest, it doesn't really feel sort of fidgety or twitchy. But at some point when the budget allows, and when I get permission from the financial controller, I will probably change the rear tyre as well to match the front. So one of the risks about today is with all the potholes, of course, these water fill the potholes and you might think you're just riding over a puddle. And of course what you don't realise is there's a 2-inch 2-inch deep pothole sitting underneath it. So you've got to turn up the power on the scanners a little bit. And just an aside, let me mention as well, I mean, we now have getting on towards 450, 500 subscribers on the channel, so thank you very much for your interest. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all the feedback you give. But to those of you who haven't come across me before, please don't take my word as gospel, in the sense that I am not a qualified motorcycling instructor. I'm a guy who, after 37 long years, bikeless years, is coming back, and what I'm trying to do is make all my mistakes very honestly in public. And as well as that, of course, with the advice that's appearing down the columns as well, with people commenting, obviously you've got to say, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but some of it is better quality than others. You've got to be very careful what you let into your head, and it's obviously your responsibility about finding yourself a good teacher that you trust. And I'll tell you what, when you've got one, you don't let them go. And I certainly learned that in project management. I spent just as an aside, in the field of project management, I worked in the defence industry, building Hawk and Tornado fighter aircraft for 20 years. And at one point I was responsible for the professional skills of the project management community. But I never really believed in what I was teaching. And it probably took me till 18 years into that period to find a project management doctrine I really could believe in. And I've done that now, and I've basically built my whole sort of training ethos around that. I run a very successful business on that now for the last 20 years. But it took me 18 years, I think, to get to what I would call the truth. And I think, just as a general comment, I think there's an awful lot of bad advice out there, in terms of the way you ride a motorbike safely. So it's so important that you develop a sense of discernment about what works for you. Now, ultimately, as I say, it's always, you pays your money and you takes your choice. But you've got to weigh the mixture. And what I mean by that is that often there's a little nugget of good advice, but maybe it's wrapped in some stuff that maybe isn't so good. So I think the point is that, don't be afraid to, discard what is wrong. And it's your responsibility, like I say, you've got to do that. And I'm very much the novice now, so just to sort of round off that learning point, really, please don't take what I say as gospel. I'm a work in progress. There are much better qualified people out there, properly qualified people who've got the experience, whose opinion is far more valuable than my own. Doesn't mean I get it always wrong, by the way, but I am a work in progress, as no doubt you can see if you've been following me for any length of time. Pin lock just beginning to steam up a little bit now. Guess it's inevitable on a day like today. Certainly tolerable, I can certainly see clearly enough. Really trying to work on keeping my distance today. And the rule of thumb I'm now using is 1 yard of distance for every mile an hour of speed. Again, thank you, you know who you are, who gave me that. So what to do here then? Following a rather nervous car driver. 45 miles an hour I'm doing. The speed limit's 50. And we've got twisty roads. Lovely twisty roads. Even in the wet. Nice quality tarmac. A decent tyre on the front. Enjoyed that. Stay toward the near side as I come over the crest. Got a good long view down the road now. Keep away from the HGV. And for the next bend, move over to the left. out towards the crown to open up that left-hander. Not too far out in case there's oncoming traffic. Not seen any other bikers today. I presume I'm the only one stupid enough to be out in these conditions. But it's still fun, isn't it, being on two wheels? I suppose on reflection I've not made this easy for myself buying, you know, just about one of the heaviest bikes you can buy, coming back after such a long time and starting in the middle of the winter. Wasn't the smart thing to do really, was it? But hopefully things just get easier. And into Oxfordshire. Move away from the HGV. Position left for the right-hander. Slow, why is that there? Ah, junction just over the top. One of my reflections, I've got to be honest, I'm a terrible rule breaker. I've always believed it's easy to seek forgiveness and permission. And I've driven for my car, and my bike actually. But the car I've driven 40 years with a clean licence. And I think it builds up a sense of, probably arrogance is too strong a word, but a sense of presumption really, that you sort of know it all. And the funny thing I'm rediscovering now as a biker is actually the road signs. And the whole science as to how a road is laid out and why the paint's on the road, and the fact that if you get two triangular signs, one above another, then the one on top is the one that's going to come first. And I've got to say I've been ignoring most of that information, which is just plain stupid really, isn't it? Now I've got to be honest, it's not going to make me sort of sit up and read the highway code cover to cover. But I'm certainly taking more interest in those signs and just curious now about what they're telling me. It's interesting on a day like today as well, it really shows the benefit of these new mirrors that I fitted, because I've got to say the BMW mirrors, unless I was to wipe them, would be almost next to useless on a day like today. Whereas the additional Metzeler mirrors I fitted are more or less crystal clear actually. So I think I've come to a personal decision, again based on some expert advice, that I need to simplify my cornering. I've been overthinking it, there's no doubt about it. Now again, that doesn't mean that what you're seeing on your screen is perfect, because I'm not. I've still got a lot of work to do to make it happen, but in my sort of head, between my ears, I think I sort of know now what I've got to be doing. Or at least I've got a better appreciation of it. Coming into Banbury. Speed limit coming up, cars following. Give a little bit of information. Just dropping the screen on the RT a little bit, because just wondering if the additional air, I'll get a bit wetter, but the additional airflow, out he comes, the additional airflow hopefully will just clear the visor a little bit. Not that it's bad. It's interesting, you get wet gloves on the RT. I'm still using summer gloves. I've used summer gloves all winter, but because of the heated grips, I don't know whether the grip puppies make any difference to that, but just feels quite comfortable really. Right, so in slow, no need to stop. Keep my eye on the distant traffic light, which is currently on green. Oh dear. And we accelerate up the hill away from Banbury. Yeah, so the only part of me that's wet at the moment, literally, and not even wet really, but damp, are my hands. And they're not cold. I think I've come to the conclusion as well that with the RT, it's probably going to take me, I would say, at least a year of ownership just to really get the feel of the bike and the confidence of it. As well as that, of course, I'm learning in parallel with that the roadcraft at the same time. But I don't think there's going to be any substitute for sort of getting 5 or 10,000 miles under my belt, really. And no amount of watching YouTube or bookwork is going to substitute for that. Well, I've seen one other biker anyway. Well done, sir, or madam. Got 2 fat lorries on a thin piece of road up here. Okay, so that's me, back to the bike. Thanks for tuning in again. Let me know what you think. Ride safe, and I'll see you next time.